Tonight's top story. The past 7 days, we've seen Canada explode into the news with reports of a massive trucker convoy protesting against the Canadian government by riding into Ottawa and setting up shop around Capitol Hill. Over 10,000 protesters have joined alongside the trucks throughout the city, creating absolute disruption on a nationwide scale. This is a story where duality consciousness makes headlines. Get the download on tonight's special report. On the great journey of self-discovery through time and space, humanity has often learned to face itself in a multitude of ways. Sometimes we go to war with each other, and sometimes we play Monopoly with the money of the world. And sometimes we take to the streets that our voices may be heard. And that's precisely what we find as many thousands of protesters and tons of megaton trucks have rallied together at the nation's capital in Ottawa to share their feelings towards vaccine mandates and the authoritarian stance the government has taken in regard to how society views and treats the unvaccinated. The official government response comes from Trudeau himself, who called the movement a fringe minority that doesn't reflect the rest of Canada.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other.
And the Ottawa Police Service Board Chair Diane Dean saying, "It has been a very long 6 days in the nation's capital," and has called the behavior of the protesters unacceptable. But everything becomes clear when we take a moment to breathe and slow down. When asking what's really going on here, we find a failure to communicate and an inability to listen. And at the end of the day, it's probably all going to come down to a show of power unless the Canadian government can soften their heart. This event demonstrates our duality consciousness very clearly. But progress and evolution in society can be born out of such circumstances. If Trudeau and his band of merry men can recognize that the country is made up of people, being that the government exists to serve the people, then they would be able to listen to what the people are saying. However, listening to what the protesters have to say naturally goes against what the government believes in currently, because the government has existed for generations and is built upon very old laws, codes, and beliefs, many of which are showing their age today in a world that is more connected than ever. Governments are often slow to adapt to new ideas, but quick to clamp down on new ones when they spring up around them. And global events such as pandemics are often opportunities for more clamping too, if you know what I mean. Not in a good way either. The quality of being slow to adapt to new ideas can be an important quality to have, but not if it comes at the expense of truth, love, or authenticity. So what this basically means is that everyone wins if the people in the government can learn to connect with the virtues of a loving heart. As evidence of this, recalling earlier, Ottawa Police Chair member Diane Deans called the behavior of the protesters unacceptable.
Holding unacceptable views.
But what she fails to truly receive in any meaningful way is that these feelings are exactly how the people of her country feel about their own government. Now, turning our attention only slightly, there is a subtle poetic irony to the situation that Trudeau himself claimed to have got COVID just as the truckers pulled into town, leading many to think that he didn't actually get COVID, but came up with an excuse to retreat from Capitol Hill while hoping the rally would subside on its own. Does he actually have COVID? It's hard to say, because truth in this situation is purposefully difficult to discern. Regardless, what we can see is that the Canadian government is playing a game of let the mouse tire itself out before the cat can easily swing in and swat it away and enforce more COVID mandates. And this is where we come back to the big conversation, a show of power. The Canadian government could violently enforce the protest away from the city, but they don't want to do that because of how the rest of the country would react. So instead, they are increasing the numbers of police and sticking with their story and not budging an inch. They also made it clear that they were going to do their best to silence these protesters no matter what, including fighting their funding.
We will hold to account not just the demonstrators, but those that fund and enable the demonstrators in any way.
Now, the protesters, on the other hand, must see that they are a rallying force from the greater collective, and so they don't have the same roots as the Parliament building does. Naturally, trucks are not made out of concrete, their roots are on the road. As of just the other day, over $10 million was withheld from the trucker rally GoFundMe page, as the cops have told GoFundMe that it is a violent protest. And so now GoFundMe is going to be giving the money back to those who ask for it, or donating the money to random charities instead. This leaves the truckers in a rather tricky spot. They're going to need record numbers of protesters rallying in order for the government to budge at all. And even then, I'm not sure what would happen. What would happen if 100,000 people flooded Capitol Hill? Or 1 million? Would the government listen then? Or send in the army? See what I mean? Show of power. If we look at the cycles and patterns, generally speaking, when this kind of thing happens, the government will continue to draw it out, twist and turn the narrative to meet their own agenda, and wait for the protesters to weaken by exhaustion. The story would then be told in the future as a case of the fringe minority who got excited and just weren't informed about how vaccines work. And while that is genuinely sad, the soul of humanity still gets the last laugh, because a government that is not willing to bend or soften itself will become hardened like an old tree and collapse under its weight. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but if they or any government creates an environment where its people fundamentally dislike them, then they will be forced to change, whether they like it or not. Not for nothing, but Elon Musk literally just tweeted that the true fringe minority might just be the government. No matter what the outcome of the protester rally, history has shown us that when a government becomes too rigid, unable or unwilling to deeply listen to what the people are saying and adjust itself to being more aligned with the greater collective good, in the big picture, those nations are doomed to fall or transform. As we've seen with the revolutions of the past, when it's time for a new leadership, a new one will always rise to take over from the old paradigm. And it doesn't always go clean, but it does happen. But what we can't forget is that it doesn't have to be that way. Justin Trudeau simply needs to open his heart. Thank you for watching, and have an excellent night. Hey, do you think it's possible that Justin Trudeau actually has an open heart and he agrees that the mandates are too much, but he has no choice because there's like an Illuminati control threat on him, and that if he steps out of line, they would destroy him publicly or something like that? Huh? Why are you asking me? I'm just a cameraman. How would I know that? Ah, good point. We should ask the audience. Hey, hit the like button and leave your response for what you think is really going on. The truth of the matter, beyond all truths. Thanks, and toodles!